When I was 14, I worked at a McDonald's that was connected to a gas station. It was a truck stop, so it was very busy 90% of the time. The only downside to working at a truck stop fast food place was that the bathroom was on the complete other side of the building. I was a freshman in high school. At the time, I was pretty small, maybe not in height, but in size. I was 5'6" and anywhere from 130 to 150 pounds. Not a super teeny target, but small enough to where I'd probably had made an easy target. This wasn't a fear of mine, however, maybe it should have been. I remember I was in gym class. It was maybe the middle of the school day, and it was one of those days where we could just sit on the side and catch up on our work from other classes if we didn't want to participate in the game. My friend and I did this most of the time and almost never actually worked on anything important. We were laughing and joking around until I received a Power School notification on my school iPad excusing me from the remaining classes that day. I was really confused, considering my mother hadn't mentioned anything about picking me up early, and I was only seeing my dad every other weekend, and he wasn't the type to pick me up from school. I was grounded, so I didn't have my phone with me, other than a cheap flip phone my mom had gotten from Walmart. I texted her about the notification, but before I got a response back from her, my gym teacher told me I needed to grab my things and to go to the office because my mom would be picking me up. This confused me even more. I shot my mom another text, asking if she was picking me up from school. She freaked out and told me not to leave the building. At this point, I was sitting in the office by the window, waiting for apparently no one to come pick me up until the situation was figured out. My mom ended up calling the school and letting them know that I wasn't allowed to leave with anyone that day. Apparently, whoever called claimed to be my mom and said that they were going to come pick me up. As far as I know, no one ever showed up to pick me up, and I didn't hear anything else about it. My mom wasn't comfortable with me working at the truck stop, and we got my location switched to a McDonald's that was closer to town and wasn't connected to a gas station. We think this might have happened if someone saw my name tag and possibly called all the schools in the area until they found me. But I still have no idea how they would have known my last name. With that being said, creepy stranger who pretended to be my mom over the phone and pulled me out of school, let's not meet. Huge trigger warning for this story for animal abuse. Please move to the next story if you think it will trigger you. This took place when I was in middle school, a little over 20 years ago, 6th or 7th grade. My science teacher announced to us we had a new student, but strangely, there was no new kid to be seen. No, not today, she said. This is a warning, not an announcement. Our new student, David, will be joining us next week, fresh out of juvenile detention. I don't recall if my teacher had told us what he'd done, or if I found out through other means afterwards. We just knew it was bad. The story gets worse with every sentence. Trigger warning for animal abuse. He and his friend had stolen an old woman's dog, a poodle mix. They strung the dog by its leash from the tree branch. They proceeded to beat the dog. They took a weed whacker to the dog's body and hung it. They picked up the pieces of the dog and threw it into a styrofoam cooler. They threw the cooler into a pond. This was our new student. He wasn't in class long, maybe a day, maybe two, definitely less than a week. He sat 2 desks in front of me and complimented my Junko jeans. I rarely wore them after that. Otherwise, he didn't speak much, and no one spoke to him. We only stared. I could only find one article about the original crime. I tried looking it up by this guy's name to see if he was torturing and murdering these days, but couldn't find any info. So yeah, that was the new kid. But all these years later, I still remember seeing him for the first time, sitting at his desk, so unassuming, so normal looking. Creepy isn't an understatement, really. I'm a 19-year-old, and I live far away from home in a studio room. I'm often up late, and last week, I was just doing some laundry at around 11 p.m. I saw a man sitting in the lobby. I saw him around a bit at night, but I didn't think much of it. I'm in the laundry room. I just put my clothes in the dryer and I hear the laundry room door beeping, which meant someone was coming in. There's the man standing there with no clothes to wash, just staring at me. I maneuvered around him and headed to the lifts. He followed me quickly and cornered me and asked me for my Snapchat. I was tired and I just wanted to get back to my room, so I stupidly gave it to him. I figured he'd message me and tried to flirt. I'd say, I have a boyfriend, sorry if you thought this was anything else. And that would be the end of it. I'm about 5 foot, very long red hair, and I'm half Indian English with Afghanistani descent. So I'm white passing, but kind of exotic. People tend to stare at me. Anyways, he starts messaging me. It's kind of normal. Then he starts saying weird stuff like, I saw you a month ago, and I was impressed. I've been visiting a friend and staying here. And I've been watching you. I noticed you come out mostly at night. He told me that he was Saudi Arabian and only visiting for 5 days. Then it gets worse. He says, I love you. I can't help it. And I say I have a boyfriend. I only want you. And continues to completely ignore that. He asked to come to my room and I say no. Then he wanted a hug. He asked me if I lived alone and if I was a virgin. He kept saying he loved me and that I was perfect for him, that I impressed him. At that point, I recorded all the messages on Snapchat, spoke to him a little bit more to gather some evidence so that I could take it to reception in the morning. He had been watching me for a month. I got my guy friend who lives on the 2nd floor to walk me down to the laundry room. We sat in the student lounge area, and my friend calmed me down. I was shaking from adrenaline and fear. We saw him around the laundry room again, looking for me, but luckily I'd already picked it up. I ran back to my room and my friend says that I can stay in his room, but I say it's okay, and I'll just lock my door. It's about 1 a.m. and I hear someone outside my door trying to get in. I asked my friend if he's outside his room, and he said no, and I just froze. I didn't want to make a sound. I felt sick to my stomach and helpless. Eventually it stopped and whoever it was went away. In the morning I reported it to the reception and then went to stay a few days with my boyfriend. Then after went to London to visit a friend. And last night was the first time I spent the night in my room since this happened. I'm very paranoid now. Sadly, I should probably get used to this. It's not the first time I've been sexually harassed. One guy tried to kiss me in the club by grabbing my hand, and a bunch of other things have happened that I won't go into here. Anyway, I'm terrified to go outside my room after dark. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder and feeling paranoid. I just keep blaming myself for being too nice, and I know it's my long thick hair that attracts people's eyes to me. I just want to cut it all off. Has anyone else had similar experiences? How did you deal with it? Reception still hasn't updated me on if he's still in the building. I was in my first semester of university. I just graduated college not too long ago, and had entered into a program that after a while I would come to resent. During that time of adjusting and taking daily transit an hour and a half away from where I grew up into a bigger city in order to study was somewhat of a new adventure for me. In a lot of ways, I was just beginning to sprout as my own individual and trying to carve a path for my life while simultaneously opening myself up to new experiences and a new environment. I have longtime friends who go to the same facility as me, but at the time, our schedules wouldn't always line up. This meant a lot of the days were spent traveling back and forth and walking around the city alone. I really wanted to try to expand my horizon of adventures and friends during this period. In a lot of ways, I was really desiring to find a good community on campus that could help satiate my boredom and loneliness. I can be extremely extroverted, but sometimes I find it takes a lot of me to try to actually pursue and maintain friendships that haven't been established years prior. I've made friends before from different classes in college, but ultimately, and I know this makes me an asshole, but I would end up texting less and less till eventually either side would end up ghosting one or the other. Because I'm a busy guy, I don't find myself prioritizing people who I feel aren't as important to me as others. I know, a shitty thing to say, but nonetheless, the truth. One day, however, I met Joel. I was on the phone with my fiance and distinctly remember exactly how it all went down. As I was walking out of the school Starbucks with a decaf coffee, I had one headphone in, and I was heading to class through a small stretch of underground passageways under the streets that connects the school's library building, the actual building that possesses classes. As I was hastily making my way, I saw a short, stout guy, looking roughly my age at the time, 21, with a thick brown beard and a hat on. Our eyes met, and when I was simply about to walk past him, he asked me something in a very charismatic and calm tone. "Hey, sorry to bother you. You look like a pretty busy guy, but I was wondering, do you mind doing a survey about religion? It's for one of my classes." To this day, I regret answering and wish I had simply continued walking, but at the time, I was becoming more and more compelled with the notion of formal religious institutions and questioning my own religious faith, practically leaning towards Christianity. "Sure," I replied cordially. He then introduces himself as Joel, and after we went through the small survey pertaining to the religious affiliations and perspectives on religion, Joel informed me that there was a small group of students like himself, and they were planning to get together as a group and discuss various religions in order to gather new insight and to create a community. Of course, with the perspectives of finding some new friends on campus and also exploring my own spiritual perspectives. I gave him my phone number after he asked for it. He said that he'll contact me in the next following days. Upon entering our first meeting, I sat in a very crowded place with seats at our school facility and was greeted by Joel alongside a bunch of other members. They introduced themselves to me and vice versa. They were all extremely kind to me. We began a small group meeting, and I was a bit shocked to find out that the sole topic that they were discussing was Christianity. I wasn't aware that we were only going to be discussing Christianity, which was against what he had proposed this group to constitute upon our meeting in the tunnel. That being said, I was still curious enough to continue, and I was accompanied by 3 other young guys of my age, who after a bit of talking to, I found out we had a lot of similar interests. Joel, who now presented himself as the leader of the study group, relayed how he was analyzing Christianity through a multi-step program. This program was designed to unveil the holy power associated with the religion to us. Since I was curious, and I wanted to learn more about religion as well as having made some new friends, I continued to attend this study group for the rest of the semester, in which there were a few circumstances where I questioned Joel's interpretations and was met with hard resistance. It felt at times my wavering belief in what Joel was saying would be met with straight dismissal as opposed to actual conversation. I continued to brush that off as the group that I was working with got closer. The school's club, which I was now a part of, provided me exactly what I wanted. We even went to church-run events together, where I quit vaping, and many individuals reported mystical experiences. Things only started getting concerning with Joel during the one-on-one conversations. I discussed my personal experiences and belief in my newfound religious beliefs, and all of my former spiritual experiences as well, and Joe exposed to me a story of a few incidents that at the time, I certainly should have taken as red flags. For example, when he was younger, he had gone to a retreat. At the retreat, he was in prayer. He said that he began to hear the voice of God talk to him. I questioned at first if he was referring to the voice of God as more of a metaphor, but he reassured me that he literally heard God speak to him before. When he told me this, I became a bit unnerved. At the helm of the community was Joel, but in all the other senses, I was satisfied with who I was and what we were doing together. Though I'm not entirely dismissive of strange occurrences, especially pertaining to spirituality, his experience talking with God came off as uncomfortable for me. He also said that the way that he would pray would involve direct conversation and reply with God. Out of discomfort, I wouldn't prod him on what he meant by this. This, of course, was just the beginning. After the summer had ended, I had found myself in the most religiously devoted state I'd ever been in. Throughout the summer, I had a treacherous injury, which made me housebound for months, and had to call upon God in a lot of ways for strength. Within my newfound devotion, I was elated to fall back into the community that I had nurtured and grown with throughout the last semester, relating to something that I found deep joy in. At the first lesson of the semester, something was very different. Joel, as before, was at the helm of our study session, but was now perpetually interrupted by people coming in to greet him and give him praise. It was so bad that we literally sat and watched for 20 minutes before he could go into our lesson, as 10 more people, mostly younger men of our age, came to greet this man. As aforementioned, when not unnerving, he was extremely charming and gave the impression that he cared deeply for everyone. Once our lesson began, he introduced us to the second phase of the program. He explained that this was one of the toughest programs of the different levels that there were, as it required even more devotion and, even more importantly, an emphasis on sacrifice for those who engaged. He showed us a diagram of a small stick person, and he showed us that in this program, we would have to accept Jesus as the center of our life. He explained that by making our lives surrounded by Jesus entirely, that we would be not losing something, but would be gaining. He also began to go over the notion that sex before marriage is a sin, and that if we continued with this program, we would have to make a sacrifice of giving up sex in our relationships and prove that we weren't. He said that many guys weren't able to continue because of this. I talked about this afterwards with one of the members of the group, who, not unlike me, was in a serious relationship with someone they loved for years. In my personal opinion, though we weren't married in an altar, I knew that both me and this member felt devoted to our partners, as if we were already married in a sense, and we both expressed how Joel's behavior surrounding this was off-putting, controlling, and intrusive. After our lesson, I was a bit dumbfounded by the intensity with which he gave the speech about this new program that we would be engaging in this semester. Joel and I sat down for a few minutes and talked, in which I expressed my experiences of devotion from the summer and explained my entire experience with my injury. He then went on to tell me that at times he was actually able to know beforehand. This seemingly random and strange statement shocked me. He said, for example, he was able to know something another member had before they even mentioned it, and in the way he described it sounded like he was saying he had a form of mystical foresight. I was a bit jarred to say the least, though I felt like it would be impolite to question any further. Joel went on to tell me that he believed that if I successfully completed this program, I was primed to become a teacher for the program that I had done the semester prior, leading others who would join, and that I would have a bright future in the organization. In that moment, with the way he had laid down on us in the lesson, I felt overwhelmed by his expectations of me. It almost became evident that Joel was not a student at our facility. In fact, he was in his mid-30s and had kids. He was actually just a part of an organization that recruits people to become Christians and missionaries that work on our campuses. This means that he actually lied to me when I first met him. He wasn't a student. There was no group talking about various religions, and his whole purpose was to convert me and make me join the organization he was a part of. At this point, school began to pick up a lot, and I was also working part-time to help support myself as I was on the train to head back home the next week. I forgot that my second lesson of the program that semester was supposed to happen, so I texted Joel saying, "Hey man, I actually got into the train and forgot about our lesson. Sorry about that, dude. I'm not going to be able to make it, as I also have work later." To which he replied, "Can you get off the train? Try and get here as soon as possible." I was a bit dumbfounded at this question, since I live an hour and a half away. It wasn't easy as getting off a train and heading back in the opposite direction, and he knew that. He knew the area I lived was remote and a long distance away. I also told him that I had work, which he painfully disregarded. "No man, unfortunately I can't come. Have a good lesson," I replied. To which he replied again, "Come on man, just get off that train and come back." At that point I was annoyed. Not only did I feel like he was commending me, but that he was also blatantly disregarding the fact that I said no and that I had to work that day. I didn't write him back. I talked with my fiance about it and how I was starting to feel about the whole ordeal, and how I felt guilty about having feelings of wanting to distance myself from the group, while simultaneously not wanting to lose the community and friends that I had established along the way. My fiance told me that the way that Joel was acting, and with regards to the things that he said, she started to become uncomfortable with the whole situation. I remember sitting in bed thinking about leaving the group and how the prospect made me feel physically ill. After all, I had been giving everything I wanted to the community, except at the helm was a seemingly increasingly controlling and persuasive being who was making me and possibly other members more miserable. There was an event the following Friday that was going to be at the church, which was organized by the community. Originally, since many of my friends from the group were going, I intended to go, but I was scheduled by my boss to work that day, so there was no way I was going to be able to go. I knew that Joel would insist upon me coming anyways, so when Joel texted me reminding me that the event was on Friday, I told him I wasn't going to be able to go because I had to work. To this, he replied and simply said, "What? Bro, no way, you've got to come. Take work off and find someone to cover your shift. God wants you here." As was expected, he dismissed my decision and also said that I had to be there because God wanted me there, as if he was his mouthpiece. I went on to text him again and informed him, "No, sorry man, I can't do that. I just got a promotion and I have to be here. I hope you guys have a great time anyways." To which he again replied in a similar way that he had before. This was my personal breaking point. He knew the importance of my financial situation, and his dismissal of my personal boundaries as well as his commanding made me decide to text him explaining that I was done with the group and that I wanted to pursue my own religious exploration without the group from then on. I felt as if he was slowly but surely increasingly controlling me and trying to take what he could, commanding me as if he was the leader of my life in any possible way. It was even up to him if I could fuck my fiancée. He replied to me with a very long paragraph persisting in a sort of overly kind manner that I had to continue with the group and that it was God's will for me to show up at this event even though I was completely unable. He was certain that this group was meant for me and that God had told him that this was where I was supposed to be. After I responded again telling him to stop and that I would not, he sent me another paragraph of similar length repeating what he would say, no matter what I would say, and whenever I would say no, he would overstep my boundaries while maintaining a kind and friendly tone in order to try to push me into submission when I clearly said no. At this point, I said I don't want to talk to him anymore, to which he replied, "Bro, why? Can we meet up? I want you to explain why you don't want to continue. Bro, so we can meet up, so I can get a better sense, and we can figure out what we're going to do from here." Even in this, I knew that he was just trying to elongate his chance to bring me back to the group and continue his reign of control. I said I didn't want to, so he asked again. I decided at that moment I needed to block him, so I did. A semester later, I was walking down the street of my school, and as I walked by the pizza parlor, lo and behold, who came out? Joel walked over to me with one of his friends and said that I was one of his buddies. I uncomfortably stood there, and his friend went inside for a moment while Joel turned around and looked to me and asked me with disarming gentleness, "Did you block me?" I replied, "Yes." He then said, "You should unblock me, that way we can meet up and talk, because I really want to know why you left the group." To which I eventually was frustrated, said okay, and went on my way. That night he texted me on my Instagram, insisting that we meet up, and I blocked him there too. In short, I'm thankful for my fiancée, who is the love of my life. Without her, I'm not sure I would have been strong enough to have left the group and his control. The fact of the matter is that there were other guys in the group who had absolutely nobody. They had nothing, and they were prime targets for a charismatic control freak. There were members of that group who were in higher levels, so to speak, who had all done the programs, who seemed as if they were initiated, but they had all become such restricted fundamentalists that their lives and their openness to new experiences were significantly thwarted. Be aware of who you let into your life, and just because someone's nice to you doesn't mean that they don't have ulterior motives. Also, learn to stand your ground and respect yourself. If you say no, mean it. So Joel, you controlling cult leader, let's not meet again.